Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Sword and Sandal Cinema, I am honored to bring you the one, the only Setna West of Knemet and the one and only Diana Montford. Greetings and welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Well,
Hello,
hi there.
Diana. How are you, dear?
Hello, Setna.
Hello, Diana. Or I should say, Lady Diana. How are you tonight?
Just fine. Are you Setna the High Priest?
I am Setna West, formerly known as Michael K. Waterman.
Well, that's great. I'm Diana Montford, formerly known as Diana Montford. So,
Okay, well, tonight's movie is Sudan, starring the ever beautiful Maria Montez. And Diana, darling, what did you, or should I be careful? What did you think of this movie?
beautiful. This is not a crappy little B picture. This is a
Oh,
Class A, super special, beautiful production. Beautiful. With the highest production values, glorious costumes, beautiful actors. I think it's great. It's a really wonderful movie. I
Maria
mean,
looked.
within the confines of the formula used for these sort of 1940s epics, where whatever. But it's a great movie and it's beautiful to look at.
Maria Montez is absolutely gorgeous in this movie. And although her accent is very heavy, you can hear and understand everything she's saying. And she does play a very chic, quasi Egyptian princess. And I think it's very well done that way. The storyline is interesting. Um, you have an Egyptian princess, whose her father, the pharaoh, has been murdered by a vizier, and she runs away into the desert. And of course, she falls in love with one of the desert chieftains. But first, she's, sold in as a slave, as you know.
I know
And
the poor dear, she gets branded. Yikes.
yeah, and they really did that. Not only did the Romans, the Egyptians, the Greeks, even the Persians did that. They used a brazier to heat up the coals, and they made branding irons. And they had just like in the cowboy days, the particular
Mm.
king or pharaoh or um, lord or what have you had his own or her own brand. So that must have hurt like hell, and they,
Yeah, well, the less said about that, the better. But
they had
let's
to.
dwell on the positive. It is and it's a fun movie. I mean, and it's quite engrossing. I mean, I loved it. I listen. It would make me forget World War II. It's from 1945, and regarding Maria Montez's accent, if you look at the opening credits, they have dialogue director, which they hadn't had since the early talkies. But with poor Maria around, you sort of need a dialogue director.
I read some background on this film, and as I mentioned to you earlier, they wanted originally Rita Hayworth, who's also Mexican, and
She's
they
not
put
Mexican, she's Spanish. I've told you this
Spanish.
before.
Okay, I was told otherwise. Anyway, the point is they couldn't get her. She was working on something else, and so this beautiful Maria Montez appeared out of nowhere. She had done some other films too, but they wanted to build her up, so they put her on, in the number one position, as it were. And I think she did a very good job.
I think she did an excellent job, and she is beautiful, and no complaints. It's a great movie.
What do you want to talk about as far as the storyline? Did you find it, those things actually happened and not, not in 1940s, almost Buster Crab costumes. She looked like she could be
Well,
Dale
they're
Arden.
absolutely to die beautiful costumes.
Yes.
How they managed during the shortages of World War II to make those glorious costumes. And it's very clever the way they do it, because shoulder pads were in, but not in ancient Egypt. Excuse me. They use that Egyptian collar that women of rank wore, and they simply extend it at the shoulders, and that gives it the 40s shoulder pads look without being totally anachronistic. It's wonderful. The film is great. I have no complaints. It's one of the best films I've ever seen, frankly. I love it.
I think the storyline is very romantic. I think the sets are very beautiful. And I loved the villain. He was hysterical and wicked and evil, and everything was the way it should have been on point in those times. But
Yeah,
let's talk
it's a
to our
great movie.
we need to talk to the audience about the storyline, though, because they may not have seen it. And this is a relatively early Technicolor film, also. You know,
Should we,
um,
excuse me, should we divulge spoilers or not?
I think if they wanted to see it, yes, I think we should talk about it a little bit. That's why we're here. I think that we need to let them know that she was an Egyptian princess. She is the favorite daughter of the pharaoh, and the pharaoh, I will say, was murdered by the Grand Vizier, who has designs on becoming the next pharaoh. And he wants to get rid of her because she's, after all, the heir. You want to take it from there?
Yeah. And, well, she, as a joke, goes to sort of a dive bar, ancient Egypt style, and dances as a dancing girl, and she's great at it. And everyone assumes that she's really a dancing girl. And she leaves that with her ladies, and she realizes that there's trouble afoot. So she rides in the desert alone because the Grand Vizier's men are after her. She is sold into slavery and branded and made into a genuine slave girl. But she escapes that because she has her horse with her, and it's the Golden Stallion. It is a beautiful horse, very well trained. She is an expert horsewoman. She rides off into the desert. She comes upon two petty criminals, one of whom is seriously gorgeous, two men, and they rescue her. And, and well, why don't you take it from there?
Well, she falls in love with one of them, the better looking of the two. And he kind of falls in love with more in love with her. But she is a princess and she must marry a prince, and they believe she was kidnapped. And the vizier, of course, wants to get her back because he wants to kill her, the truth be known, or marry her and make her his royal wife. And then, after all, that would make him a legitimate pharaoh, which of course wasn't true. So you have the two guys that are going to be fighting over her, and she has to choose, of course, and she's not going to
Yes,
choose.
but at the time, she does not know that it was the vizier who killed her father.
No, she doesn't. She
She
just
thinks it's this gorgeous Turhan Bey, who's a slave but is the head of a group of what, insurrectionists?
bandits,
And
and yes, revolutionaries and bandits, yes, because they feel
well,
the
yes,
pharaoh was. They felt the pharaoh was unjust, and it was actually the vizier's edicts and what would you call them? Edicts and commands that have made the country up in arms.
I think we can relate to that so closely today. No comment.
I knew what you
Yes,
were going to say, and it's one of the reasons I chose this film because it was very um, current, as it were. I'll leave it at that.
oh, and it's a beautiful, I mean, just visually, it is absolutely perfect. It's just beautiful.
It
I
really
know
is.
you're going to hate me for saying this, but it's infinitely more attractive as a visual than. Excuse me, I've been smoking cigarettes all day. Yes, I'm better now. I find it infinitely more attractive than Liz Taylor's Cleopatra.
Well, that's your
Physically.
thought. That's your thought. I think that she's attractive I'm sorry, I disagree with you on that because I think Elizabeth Taylor was more beautiful, and I think her
Well,
costumes were
she's more
more.
charismatic. No, but I mean the look of the film.
Well, the costume, well, yeah, some of the things there, but the costumes in Cleopatra were more accurate. This was stylized Hollywood, and a lot of fun, and that was Cleopatra was not a lot of fun. It was very dry in a lot of ways.
And very dark in many ways. Yeah.
It was extremely dark. They cut actually terrible other scenes out. You didn't get to see the vizier in there executed, and it was filmed. There were 93 hours filmed, and we
Of
got to
the
see.
Liz Taylor film. Yeah.
Yes, 93 hours. This film, I believe they did in 5 or 6 takes. I read that it flowed so easily and simply, and they were not out in the desert. They were in the the back lots,
Sure.
and it was because they couldn't afford to do location. It was somewhere out in Baja or somewhere, to make it look.
Right. Well, it wouldn't have occurred to them to, it was easier just to have all the control in, the neighborhood. That's why people love Southern California. You have mountains, you have desert, you have everything. So, yeah.
And with the war probably still going on when this was begun, I don't think it was a good time to go into the Middle East. The Germans were in Egypt, remember? Um,
Yes, Rommel and all
and
that. Yes.
it was a
It wouldn't have
terrible.
worked.
It was a very yeah.
And
They were
no one did that. No one went on a location that way then. It was
no, not
easier
until
to do it at home.
not until later, into the late 40s, early 50s. I'm thinking of Roman Holiday and some of the other films that were done.
Well, yeah, but that was a whole other mindset. And Chinechita started in the late 40s, I believe, or rather it was perfected in the late 40s. Yeah, but I mean, no one went on location in those days. It was easier just. And
Everybody was kind of broke. The world was recovering again.
well, yeah, after the war, yeah. But I mean, even during the war, nobody went on location. It was easier just maybe they went to the desert, but that's not, it wasn't that far.
And
And,
films were
it
very,
was easier.
there were no large budget movies. They couldn't afford it. There was too much going on, putting bonds and things and such
Yeah,
because of
but
the
I
war.
think Sudan is very big budget. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
I
it
mean, they
was a
pulled out
large
all the
budget.
stops.
I think I read it was 20 or 30 thousand dollars.
Well, it's a
And that,
great movie. I totally
yeah,
recommend it to anyone and everyone.
I'm really
And it's fun and it's good. I have no complaints. It's a great movie.
I'm so happy to hear this. It was such a positive genre and fun and a romp, in a certain way. So, I mean, it had villains, it had beauties, it had heroes, it had all the elements that people needed to escape from the miserable situation that was going on in the world at that time. So,
Sure. Yeah.
I was glad you enjoyed it because I wanted to bring something to our audience that you could comment on and that you would like. I wanted something that you'd feel, you know, because you're such a person that knows about style and art and makeup and costumes and sets, and you're very knowledgeable about Hollywood. So I knew, you'd be able to look at this with the eye of a critic, but also with the eye of a viewer. And you're telling me what I think the audience saw that was beautiful escapism. It was just like you said, cinematic perfection. It
Yeah.
has all the pathos, and it's got a great story, and it's just like you said, visually gorgeous. You know,
And great acting, too.
yes,
Maria is, I know this sounds crazy, but she's totally credible as a queen of Egypt, even though she's a gal from the DC, from the Dominican Republic. But she is
but
completely credible.
oh yeah,
Yeah, I mean, as far as it goes.
she had she had that it factor that like Carmen Miranda did and Rita Hayworth did and so many other exotic beauties. And we needed that then. We really did. We need it now too, but we needed it back then because the war was had devastated everybody. Every family had lost something, or
Yeah.
knew somebody that did. It was a
Or, well, my own father was off at the war when that film was made. Yeah, sure.
My uncle was at the Battle of the Bulge. My uncle Joey, my
There
grandma.
you go.
Yeah, so and he built later. He built beds for the presidents. He was the one responsible for the beds that were in Air Force One. He was a great engineer, and I'm
Well,
sorry
that's great. That's good.
he passed
But
back in.
yeah, some of those still, and I mean, with all the shortages around that, they could come up with those magnificent sets and costumes. You have to really hand it to them. I mean,
It
you
was
couldn't
really
do better in a time of plenty. It was just wonderful.
it was
Everything is
it was
beautiful. It's a great
literally
film.
it was literally done on a dime. Whatever they had in the
Yeah,
back
but
lot.
it looks like a gazillion dollars.
Well, that's what I mean. They spent at whatever they had to spend, but they scraped the back lots for amazing things. Some of the things from way back in Theda Bara's time. There were
Yeah, I
costumes and
know.
sets that were left back that nobody remembered were there.
They would remake them, yeah. They
Yes.
had to. They had no other way, yeah.
So I found the people that created this film very resourceful, and very thoughtful. You really did, as I said, it was a great escapist piece, and it just showed good, the battle of good and evil, and good wore out, won out, I should say, and it just gave us a little bit of hope and a little bit of romance, and a little, it was like that was a good movie to take your girlfriend to or your boyfriend to.
It's a good movie, period. I mean, it is a great movie. It is
Okay.
one of my all-time favorites. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
You've never seen it before, right?
No, no.
I came across it a few years ago. Um, I was looking at different movies that I needed to do that would be involved with Egyptian themes. And I thought, well, okay, let me look at this. I had seen another one that was called Nefertiti. Deborah Paget was playing Nefertiti, or Jean Crane, one of the two. They always look pretty much alike to me. Um, Played Nefertiti, and it was also interesting and very talented, beautiful. Edward Pardum, who later played
Oh, he's cute. Yeah, the Egyptian. Yeah.
Edward Sinaway in the Egyptian, right? He plays the sculptor that created the bust of Nefertiti.
Well, he's also in The Prodigal. He was big on those sword and sandal movies, you know?
Yes, he did many, many, many of them. He also did, I think it was a Jack and the Beanstalk kind of a thing a while earlier, later on too. And then he kind of disappeared. You didn't see him after a while.
Well, I read that he was very difficult to work with, and Lana Turner couldn't stand him. And in The Prodigal, when you alienate everyone, that's not a way to keep your job, really.
All I can say is I met her back in the 1980s, and she was very kind to me. And she was somebody that she played it the way she saw it, and I liked her. I did. I don't know anybody that knew Edward Furdum. Um, the one I wish I'd met was the crazy Nefra, which was Bella Darby, who was kind of had the same voice as Hervé Villechaize
Oh,
from Phantom.
dear. Well, she was apparently Daryl F. Donnett's girlfriend,
Yeah.
and he was trying to make her a star, and it never really took, you know?
No,
So,
she was terrible. She was very attractive, but she was terrible. So, the audiences didn't respond to her. And besides, you had people like Gene Tierney and Gene Simmons there. I mean, you can't go up against that.
no, they're real actors, yeah.
Gene
And Jean
Simmons
Tierney is considered very beautiful, so,
she was. My favorite movie of hers will always be The Ghost and Mrs. Muir with
Oh,
Rex
that's
Harrison.
beautiful.
It makes me
That is
cry.
a beautiful film. Yeah,
It
it's
is
a beautiful film, so touching, so lovely. It's a great film.
very bittersweet. And
Yeah.
and this was one of my favorite. That was one of my favorite movies of Gene Simmons. I mean, she was, Guys and Dolls, The Robe, a thousand other things, Spartacus, and she was wonderful in Spartacus when she plays his
Oh,
wife.
she's great. Yeah, I loved Spartacus. I thought that was a great movie too.
Well, Stanley Kubrick, you really can't go wrong. It was
Well, yeah. Although I think 2001 is sort of boring myself, but
I
whatever.
didn't like that. And Kirk Douglas did such a good job in this movie, in that movie, and also The Viking with Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh. He
That was
actually,
my late boyfriend. He loved that movie, The Viking.
you know what? I believe,
I had a boyfriend for 27 years. He died of pancreatic cancer, but one of his all-time favorite movies was that movie. Yeah.
well, it's the first time I fell in love with Viking culture and such, and I thought it was a great movie. So that's in that same genre, that same period, escapism, fantasy, because of course, Tony Curtis fights off Kirk Douglas and gets the girl, you know.
See, now this is the problem with today's films. It's just crap. You go to the movies, you see awful things you don't want to see, blood and gore in every kind of movie, depressing situations. The movies say, well, people are no good, life sucks, and then you die. Who needs this? You go to see a movie like Sudan, you're happy, it's beautiful, you're uplifted. You go to see a contemporary movie, you think, God damn, what is the use, you know?
So this movie, this Sudan, I would have thought it would be a great movie to go to before dinner, and come back and have a couple of cocktails and discuss this at the table and, talk about, as we're talking about it, that it was, something that would make uplift you. And that,
Oh, yeah.
everybody, and we need those kind of films now. We need things that are, I agree with you in a certain way. Everything is CGI. You have gratuitous violence. You have all
Oh,
sorts
my
of,
God. I mean, you go to a romantic comedy and someone's hand is severed in a meat grinder, and I don't know what else. It's awful. Yeah.
well, we need something that's, romantic, a little funny, beautiful for the eye. I just saw yesterday, I saw Wicked, and it,
Well, yeah, but that's a fantasy film too, you know?
but it didn't really give me what I wanted. What I was annoyed with, and I'll say it, the story's about the Wicked Witch of the West. But the story, the way it's written in that film, centers around Glinda. Ariana Grande's part was much larger than Cynthia's, and she basically steals the movie. The Wicked Witch of the West is kind of, and also ran in that film, and I think that's why
You know,
in box office it didn't do that well because it
you
wasn't.
know, I, yeah, you were saying?
I'm just saying I could see why people didn't like it that much, and it had a different meaning than it actually had. They really made mistakes, great mistakes in casting. I thought that Jeff Goldblum was dreadful as the wizard, and I loved Michelle Yeoh, but she was also miscast. She was very good, but she can't sing, and that was a singing part. And Jeff Goldblum can't sing. You have so many other people that could have done that part better. And they're
Well,
not.
and also I can't stand Ariana Grande's new look. She looks like crap with blonde hair. She looks awful. She should
Well,
go back to her brunette look with a high ponytail.
but her singing in that
And she's
movie,
so skinny these days. People are worried about her
she thinks
because
she's
she's
on.
too skinny.
She
She's
looks like
scary skinny
the
now,
early,
you know?
early days of Callista Flockhart, and that she was always considered very like bulimic. I thought, but
Yeah.
I didn't like. She looked beautiful in the movie, and she sang incredibly well. I didn't know. I don't know her music that well. I'm too old for her music, I think, and I was impressed by her singing. She was almost operatic, and she did. And Cynthia, who was the Wicked Witch, was okay. And but the thing I
I
like,
I think she's too weird. That's my problem with Cynthia, however you pronounce her last name. She's too. Look, it's fine to be a little weird. Look who's talking. But I mean, she is just too weird. She is so out there. Her style is so strange and unrelatable that it just. She's
well,
like a space
the
alien, not
audiences
in a
were
good
not,
way.
the audiences weren't wowed by her. I thought it was funny that in the one part of the movie when they're in Oz, that you get Christine Chenoweth and Adina Menzel right there talking to the witch. And it was, I think they stole that whole scene. It was
Well, the
hysterical.
originals, yeah, sure.
Well, I think still, in my mind, they did it better. They just, I don't know. Adina knows that role so well, and so does Christine. She's too old to play. Forgive me for saying, but she's too. They're both too old to play those parts because
I know.
But the thing is, Cynthia also did not look like a little girl when she played young Elphaba.
Well, today with CGI, they could have made the original leads look younger. That's very easy
Yes, they
today,
could
you
have. They
know?
could have actually done the whole thing CGI and just used their voices. Adina's a
Well,
much better.
no, but you take an actor and you play those games that they played with Robert De Niro in The Irishman, and
Yes,
40 years drop away.
those are filters. And as a makeup artist, it's kind of depressing because they took our work away from us in a
Well, they
certain way.
can draw the damn makeup on their faces now. Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah, yeah, they don't really need us anymore, and it hurts.
No,
I'm glad I got out of the profession when I
I am
did.
too. And it doesn't hurt us because we're out of it. But young makeup artists are probably having a terrible time
They're all
getting work.
stuck.
They mainly do red carpet now and weddings and all that,
Yes, that's what's happening. Or they do album covers, but even then, they can do all kinds of filters. But when they're
Yeah.
live, when they're live, they still need us. So that's important, that we have that work there. And, Cynthia was airbrushed green. And there too, her makeup was okay. I will say Ariana's makeup was beautiful. She looked very, very beautiful. She was, I felt, I agree with you, too thin. And the gown she had on was very Carolina Herrera or Oscar de la Renta. It was a lot of folds and ruffles and handkerchief sleeve. And it was more fashionable than it would be Glinda-ish. Yeah, I
Well,
needed more
sure.
fantasy.
Here's a fun fact. In the original Wizard of Oz, the dress that Glinda wears was originally worn by Jeanette MacDonald in a musical, and then it was slightly altered visually, and Billy Burke wears it.
And there's one other thing that you might not know. They couldn't find a crown for Billy Burke. And do you know what that is? Billy Burke.
Celluloid, it looks like.
It's made out of celluloid, but it was actually a very thin layer of Bakelite. And they cut it out. It was actually originally a bathroom garbage can,
Oh,
trash
yeah.
can. And they cut it up.
Yeah, yeah.
They found it in a bath and like a Bed Bath store, and they cut it up. She was never told till after the movie that she was wearing a garbage can on her head.
Well, the famous quote in Almost Famous that Kate Hudson wears, the white collar and cuffs on that olive green coat, those are a rug from Bed Bath & Beyond that the costume designer chopped up and put on the coat.
But it worked. And
It worked.
I'm a person and I sculpt and I paint, and I love looking at things that are, wonderful, um, imaginative things made out of everyday objects. A friend of mine his name is David Griffin, makes incredible magic wands and incredible, I'll call them
Well,
torches.
you make incredible magic wands.
I do. I
My
enjoy.
pride and joy is the wand you gave me.
Well,
It is the most beautiful object I have ever owned. It is perfect. I keep it in plastic so it will be preserved, It is beautiful. Your
thank you.
wands are beautiful.
I'm working on other things in that way. I also have crowns that I've been doing and necklaces. And that was the other thing.
Beautiful.
To go back to the movie, that was the other thing I loved about it. All the jewelry, all the
Isn't that beautiful? Yes, I noticed that too. It's really lovely. Yeah.
beautiful necklaces, bracelets, rings, even the villains had beautiful costumes. You know,
Yes, everything. Even the slaves and the soldiers have gorgeous costumes. Everything is great.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even the bandits had beautiful things, and that was very important to me. It brought home a lot of things. If you were able to see behind me, I have a papyrus of the Book of the Dead, and a lot of the costumes that they used look like these costumes. I
Well,
have
that's great. They did their homework. Good.
that was done in a few other movies. I go back to the Egyptian. The gowns that those women wore, except for Bella Darby, who wore more stylized things, looked exactly like what you'll see in the temples and the tombs and things. There were um, Daryl Zanuck had um, poo-pooed a bunch of costumes that Elizabeth Taylor was to wear, and they were exact replicas of statues. They went for
Well,
things
I've
that,
seen the original when Liz Taylor, before she got sick, when they were shooting in England, before they went to Rome, before
yes,
she got sick and had that tracheotomy. The costumes are much better
I agree. I
and
agree.
much more.
The white gown,
Oh,
the
excuse me,
white
I'm
glitter,
smoking again.
there was a
And much
white
more
glitter,
period accurate
no, there was a white
than the
glitter
ones in
gown.
the Roman version.
There was a white glitter gown that she wore when she goes to meet Mark Antony on the barge that looks right out of a 1960s dinner party. And so did her
Do you mean
hair.
that bright blue one with the
No,
hat?
the white one. It's a white gold glittery gown that she wears on the
Oh, you
barge.
mean when? Oh, I know. Yeah, when she has that body double come out, and yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
When she says
And the
Mark
big necklace
Antony.
with made out of coins. That's what you mean?
Right. And the funny thing is
Oh, and the
Cleopatra.
hair. It's like 1963. Let's go to a cocktail party. Yeah.
Exactly. I just said that, and I agree with you completely. It was completely off period. And, there are other costumes like that that actually spawned lingerie and cocktail dresses that people wore later on. Even her eye makeup, some of it that was a little too much, but some of her eye makeup was actually copied by the girls too. And
Oh,
the
yeah.
light,
Yeah, yeah.
the wigs, the light colored
Absolutely.
lips. Yeah.
I remember at the time, I'm 2 years older than you are. At the time, Woolworth sold Cleopatra wigs in their little
Mhm.
wig bar. They had a wig bar in those days. And yeah, it was
I remember
quite the
them.
fashion film.
I remember them because I had older female cousins who actually bought them, and snake bracelets to wear on their lower
Oh,
and
yeah, my
upper
mother
arms.
had one of those. Yeah.
They
But
called
my
them
grandmother, her mother wouldn't let her wear it. She said it was bad luck. So my mother never wore it.
well, I mean,
The snake bracelet.
Cleopatra didn't end up too good, did she? So, and
No, maybe my grandmother was right. Yeah.
I would like to
My
know.
grandmother, who was from Spain, said it was a sign of the devil and don't you dare wear that. So
Well,
my mother didn't wear it ever.
it was a
It was
serpent.
just a cheap costume jewelry bracelet, but whatever.
Well, I would like to know from Sudan. I would wish they had a sequel. I wish and they didn't do that back in those days. But I would like to have known what happened to the two lovers.
I would too. And yeah. And,
I thought
I listen,
I
if
was
they could,
interested.
if they could revive those people somehow, poor Maria Montes, she died at 31 in the bathtub. It was a hot day in Paris. Hollywood was through with her. Her movies, it was the fantasy stuff was over. Now they were doing things like, Roman Holiday. So it's 1950, before Roman Holiday, and she and her husband are in Paris. He's French. He's a famous French film star. She's about to be in a French movie. She's trying to lose weight. So it's a hot day in France. They have no air conditioning, at least not then. And it's the post-war, so she's in a bathtub full of very hot water. She had a heart attack, and she drowned in her bathtub, and she was only 31 years old when she died. Isn't that
It's
sad?
terrible. It's very much the same story that happened to Mario Lanza, who kept wearing these weird baths to get to lose weight because he was, an opera singer and a voracious eater. And he was always trying to lose weight. So he would look as he did in Kismet, which is a similar movie in a way. You have a love story and you have
With
fantasy.
great music and Anne Blythe. Yeah. We have
I
so many
adored.
films we can review, you know.
Well, that's why we're here, my love, so that we can do things like this. But that whole genre,
Exactly.
The Thief of Baghdad with Sabu and Kismet and the Arabian Nights, all of those wonderful films, even Abbott and Costello got involved. And Hercules will bear us out. There was even Hercules who battled Samson in one of these movies. And there's, the Desert Fox, they finally did get, and Rita Hayworth in Flame over Araby, which was amazing. And of course, she did
And in
Salome.
Salome, she's
Yeah.
very good in that
Oh,
too.
she's
Yeah.
gorgeous. So that was that whole period. And, that is our sword and sandals period. And that's why I brought this up, because this movie is certainly sword and sandals. You've got all
And
the
it's
war,
brilliant. It's great. Yeah.
and it was,
I have no criticism at all of Sudan. It is a great movie, and anyone who watches it is going to be very happy. And it's a beautiful visual movie. It's just great all across the board. I love it.
which is why I was so pleased that, when you asked me what movie we were going to do, I looked at my catalog. I mean, I've seen the movie many times, and I said, you know what? I want to do Sudan, and I knew you'd love it. I did. It wasn't tacky campy. It is campy now, but it was fantasy and it was beautiful. The dancing was beautiful. The everybody, like they say in cabaret, even the orchestra was beautiful. It was a very,
Yeah.
very well done, and that's what made me happy. It was just. It was, it's the kind of thing we need. Like you said, we need some escapism. Even the like things that are on TV now that are fantasy, as you said, they're very violent. They don't have just, I was watching a show a while back called Damsel. There's a princess that she's really a peasant, and the prince marries her so that she'll become a princess. And they cut her, and she bleeds with them, and
Oh,
then marries the prince, and then they throw her down a hole so a dragon can eat her.
no,
And
brother.
there are all these bones of all these other girls, and it's really macabre and sad and ugly. And what happens in the end is, instead of coming out of the thing, she gets on the back of the dragon and burns all the people in that castle to cinder.
This is why the world is so sucky now, because they keep seeing all this negative energy thrown at them. You know.
We've got to build up positive energy. I mean, we need Judy Garland to sing "Come On, Get Happy." We need
I
fun.
love that. That is my favorite Judy Garland uh, musical number. She does it beautifully. It's great. I love that number. It's you can see a large chunk of it in That's Entertainment. It's great. I love
But
that
that's
number.
again part of this fantasy world that they were building in MGM and 20th Century Fox. They were bringing beautiful things to the screen. Yeah, there were also very serious movies too. Mildred Pierce, for instance, but there were more.
Well, Mildred Pierce is great energy too. Here's a gal. She's middle class. She has no money, and because she's a great baker, she rises in the world and she becomes a millionaire. And that hideous daughter of hers,
And
brilliantly
life.
played by Anne Blythe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anne Blythe is still alive. She's like 96 or 98 or something, you know.
Know what my favorite Anne Blythe thing is? From the Twilight
Queen
Zone.
of the Nile
Queen of
on
the Nile, yes. She
Twilight
looked
Zone. I
so,
saw that when it was new.
I did too, and
Every
she looked
Friday night,
so beautiful. When she
she's
was
great in
so,
that.
yeah.
Every Friday night, my mother and I would watch The Twilight Zone when it was new. I was a little kid. And I remember the night that premiered, and it was so, it captured
Just,
my imagination, Queen of
she
the
just,
Nile. It's
she
great.
just, she made me look at her, and I had to see, and I thought she was absolutely gorgeous, but even for a gay man, that's my kind of girl. I like dark beauties. I always did.
Oh,
Hedy
yeah.
Lamarr.
Well, I'm a little on the bi side, and I once had the biggest crush on this knockout Filipino woman. who was just gorgeous, and she's my Facebook friend now, so that's nice.
Is that Barbara Luna?
No, someone I knew in life,
Okay.
someone I worked with.
Okay. Because there was so, but I love that whole genre, that whole period of the fantasy and just the like someone said, bringing the world up in positive, all of it. Judy Garland did the Pirate, which was with Gene Kelly,
Oh, that's so beautiful visually. That is just
right?
to die gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that wonderful number, Mac the Black. I love that number.
And Makoko.
When he slides down and he's so gorgeous in that film. Yeah,
He was
Gene Kelly.
Gene Kelly and Danny Kaye were my two favorite musical stars, male stars. I love Fred Astaire too, but Gene Kelly was handsome as hell. Danny Kaye was funny and could do anything, everything from
Well, sometimes because the world is so depressing, I go on my phone and I watch Fred and Ginger do the Continental
or
the Piccolino. It's great. I love to watch happy things.
Well, that's what the Sword and Sandals is about. It's fantasy. We've got things that they take you out of yourself. And yet, in a way, with the morals and the stories, they did hold the mirror up to nature and say, hey, look, this is what's going on. But they did it in a beautiful way. They didn't do it in an ugly way. And that's what I see
talking
now.
About Sudan, instead of showing some dirty, filthy sex scene where everybody's rolling around and saliva between their lips and that, they just fade out. And you know what happens, but you don't have to see it,
No, they made romance romantic, and that was better. I
Exactly.
agree with you completely, and that's what has to happen now too. A little romance, a little discretion maybe. Don't just stick your tongue down the next door person's throat all the way down to their belly button.
Yeah, really. I mean,
We need a little kissing and holding and love and romance and beauty. And that's what I'm hoping will happen when people see things like this. That they'll want that
Well,
again.
I think the world is in a state of flux right now. And I think we're moving toward a much more positive world. And right now, we're at the nadir of negativity. We're just in a terrible place.
We are.
Once all this crap is over, including Mr. Trump and friends, we're going to come into a very beautiful time. I hope.
We are in the age of Aquarius, and Aquarius started and it always starts. Even the sign itself was in chaos. I'm glad we didn't do this a couple of days ago. Yesterday, Mercury went out of retrograde, and as you know,
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, I'm a seven-planet Virgo. Mercury retrograde is something that frightens me. I've been very good.
I know it always does. It always did. I remember. Yeah.
I've always been, well, I had more trouble when I was younger. As I've aged now, I understand how to work better with it, to kind of roll with it. I think of it, what is that phrase, like water off a duck's back?
Yeah.
I have to watch what I say. I have to be careful what I do. I did have some trouble with my phone with the retrograde, but by and large,
it's so funny you should say that. I went offline on my phone by accident, and I had to call my phone company and get them to fix it. It's funny how Mercury in retrograde screws with communications,
Because Mercury itself is a planet made of molten lead, and it gets between the Earth and the Sun. So all the rays that the Sun would give us out, that would be for communications and things of any kind, are interrupted. So computers mess up, cash registers mess up, cars mess up. People, we're electric too. People misunderstand each other. Arguments happen, wars, murders in a larger degree than they would outside of the retrograde. Now it's gone direct on the 7th. So but what it means is that it's rolling back to being normal again. And I wanted to bring that up because These are things people didn't realize. I've done a study. Most of the wars that began from the Romans up, and I did a really long study, the larger wars took place during, guess what? Beginnings during Mercury retrograde. And
Yikes.
what I read was that even Paris, when he allegedly stole Helen of Troy, that happened from Mercury retrograde. He was doing something and she was doing something they ordinarily wouldn't do. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's someplace, it's something I had to address and I wanted to tell the audience to be aware of because it's something I do know something a great deal, unfortunately, about having 7 planets out of 9 in Virgo, which is a frightening thought to begin with anyway.
Well, yes, but
Montford,
it makes you an excellent wand maker, makeup artist, because that means you're hyper detail oriented.
and I'm extremely critical of my own, but the problem is I'm
Exactly. Yeah.
terribly critical of myself. I I am my own worst enemy. And most Virgos are. We tend to tear ourselves apart constantly. I was always looking at myself and saying, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that. It worked fine for my makeup and hair customers, but it was very, very bad for myself. I was hard, I was terrible on myself. You remember if you saw me in Bloomingdale's, I was always dressed impeccably. I mean,
Yes.
not a line at a place. And
Nothing perfect. Always.
no, and I had to be. And as I got older, I got a little sloppier, I think. I became a little more
The world
relaxed.
did. Oh, well, our style is so different now. The 80s are over, and oh, the clothes in the 80s were beautiful. Oh, I loved them, you know. I
I
really
think
did.
that, well,
It was
because
just
we had
great.
the early 80s with the disco scared me. But later on, yes, I agree. The 80s and the 90s had beautiful clothes. Um,
Yeah.
mix and match. And, I love the big gerbo pants and I love the metallic looking shirts. What were
And
they?
I love that we could wear color then. Now everything is black, 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 and gray. In those days, we wore beautiful colors and loved them. And, yeah.
I'm wearing black and gold right now. I wish you could see
Yeah,
me.
but that's different. That's beautiful. Black and gold is beautiful.
And I have behind me a beautiful gold papyrus, which is of the Papyrus of Ani, the book of the, well, it's really not the book of the dead. I get mad when people say that. It's the book of coming into the light by day. So it means leaving your body and going into the next world. And it's necessarily about the dead because it also has instructions about how to live a better life. You
Yeah.
know? And I think people need something like that now, a little instruction, because everybody, all the kids have their nose, and I'm on the phone now doing this, which is funny, but the kids have their nose buried into their phone, and they're not
Listen, I
living.
walk down the street and everyone, like when they're crossing the street, when they could get killed, people of all ages are looking at their phones. That's crazy.
I mean, it's gotten to be where, you know, it might have been, we did without them our whole lives. And now people can't do without them. Telephones have become an appendage. You
Yeah.
absolutely, the phone is the thing that you have to take with you everywhere you go. I even have a portable charger, which a lot of people do, so that if God forbid I run out of power and I can't plug it in somewhere, I have this cute little charger that I can stick right into the inside of the phone, and bingo, I have power. So that's
Here in New York, the New York buses, the city buses, have plugs so you can charge your phone as you ride, believe it or not.
all of the restaurants down here have charging stations. The Dunkin' Donuts, for God's sakes, McDonald's, they have places you can plug your phone into. It's
That's
gotten
great.
to where we are a telephone culture. Back in
Yeah,
those
but you
days,
can learn anything. I mean, I saw Sudan on my phone, and you can do anything on your phone these days. It's great.
but so people don't go to libraries anymore. People don't go to the movies anymore. The theater industry is the film industry is in a lot of trouble. They were talking about it during the Academy Awards. Um, People are not going into the theaters. They don't have to. They're
It's
going
a
to.
lot more comfortable to watch it at home, you
They're
know?
sitting on their couch. They're sitting on their bed.
Right.
or they're at the kitchen table, or they're watching like I'm doing right now and like you're doing right now. They're watching on their phones. So,
Yes.
the world has gotten very small in that way. I mean, I have a iPhone, but I mean, I'm looking at what? I'm looking at what is it, 6 inches, 7 inches of screen, like my parents had when they first got their first TV. The TV.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So we've gone backwards that way. But everything we do is, email, Facebook, everything is on the phone. I have a rather nice laptop. It's gathering dust, so I never use it. I have an iPhone.
Yeah.
It's more powerful than most computers. So what do I need a computer for? I don't.
Well, and I have to admit, Sudan, they used a beautiful print on the internet.
Yes.
Flawless. You feel as though you're right there and looking at these people live because the print is so good,
Well, I that's another reason I wanted you to see it. It's very clear. It's very perfect. It's not like
Hmm.
some of the other ones I've seen that are grainy and blurry. It's like you're watching it on in the movies back in the day. It's very clear
Yeah.
and it's very well done. And that's why we want people to see these things and not to lose them. All these old films, these kids are not watching them, and they need to. A, for the
Oh,
moral.
yeah. And really good energy in those movies.
Exactly. And we need that again. I want people to see pageantry. I want them to see what our grandparents saw. You know,
Yeah.
what my mother and father, well, my mother would be their great grandparents, but I want them to see why, what was beautiful and, and that it's not, that it isn't unpertinent to now, that it does have a message that we can use this time of in the century. I mean, the 20th century was more stable than the 21st is, I think, right now. Yes, there were wars and things, and I
We've got so much trouble since the turn of the 21st century. It's been one thing after another. September 11th, wars all over the place. Oh my God.
I mean, I was born in the end of the 50s, as were you, and we caught the end of the Korean War. I was born the year the Korean War ended, which is 1958, and then bingo, we were
I was
right
born in
into,
1956. So yeah,
and we were bingo right into
yeah,
Korea and then Vietnam, and I never knew what it was like as a little boy not to hear about war.
yeah.
And
And remember when we were kids, you'd see on the nightly news all these awful things like in the jungle, Vietnam, and people being shot, and I don't know, monks setting themselves ablaze, and
all
we're
my
almost out of
neighbors,
time.
all my neighbors were always looking at the lists in Newsday and the Daily News and America and New York Times as to who's dead, what soldiers
Yeah,
passed. And, they did
yeah.
that during, and I hear they did that in World War II also. My mother
Oh, that
said
must
that,
have been awful.
my mom
That
said
must have been so awful.
that during that
Well,
time
in World War II, yeah.
they were on there were lists on the door of the post office, long
Oh,
lists of who passed away. And, women and men were destroyed when they saw cousin this or uncle that or grandpa or whoever.
well, I can
They
tell you a
lost
short,
it.
quick story.
Go
My
ahead.
mother married my father at 17 in 1944, and he went off to England to fight in the Air Force. And she and my grandmother were in a diner eating dinner, and suddenly my mother had this awful crying fit. And everyone looked away because they understood exactly what was happening, that her husband was off at the war. And my grandmother just paid the bill and hustled her out because my mother started having hysterics because she was afraid for my father, that he would die in the war.
I didn't know them, but I did lose some of my father's uncles, and I did lose some of my grandmother, my mother's um, husbands, that were married into the family, and I didn't know that because I wasn't born yet. And
Mm.
kind of when you heard lists and lists of people that at the post office that had passed on, or people got telegrams saying, you've lost your son or
You
your
see that in old movies. there's a beautiful movie called Tender Comrade. It stars Ginger Rogers and Olivia Hussey, and it's a beautiful movie about 5 war widows. They're sort of like the, not widows, war wives. They work in a defense plant, and it's like the Golden Girls. They all move into a house together, and one of the gals, Olivia Hussey, gets a telegram that her husband's been killed.
I saw the
And,
movie.
yeah,
I remember it, and it's very sad.
yeah.
You know, and Bette Midler did For the Boys with James Caan.
I
And it
never
was,
saw that, but I hear it's very. You know, Martha Raye sued the production company because she thought that they stole her story.
it's really not about just her. It was about all of the USO performers. Um, and she was a little wrong, but you know, Martha Raye was a very bitter person. She had a very sad life after, truly, after the wars and such. Her career kind of vanished till she did Benita Bazaar in the Bugaloos
Hey,
back in the
well,
60s.
I
on that
guess.
note, we're going to
Back
have to
in
continue with a part 2 on another day.
sure.
I want to
I was
thank,
waiting for
Well, can
you.
I just say one thing? I
sure.
wholeheartedly recommend Sudan. Go see it. See it on the internet. It's great. You'll love it.
Thank you. And thank you for the conversation post Sudan and beyond Sudan. And I was very entertained and informed. Thank you both. And how can people find you and contact you and enter your wonderful worlds apart from the show?
Go on, Diana.
You can contact me through Hercules.
Okay. Well, I'm an old hand at this. You can get me at the Pernataru Temple, both on Facebook and on Instagram. You can reach me at Michael K. Waterman, which is my real name. You can get me at Phone a Wizard, which is my work. And you can get me on my phone number, 516-650-3691. And of course, you can reach me through our wonderful Hercules.
Thank you very, very much to both of you for an excellent show. And the movie you're talking about earlier with Hercules was Hercules, Ulysses, and Samson,
Yes,
which is
yes.
one of my favorite Peplum films.
I
We
thought
should
you were
review
gonna,
that one then.
Let's do it next month.
I thought you were gonna perk
Sounds
up.
good.
I really did. I thought you'd perk up when I said that.
Yeah, I did. Well, thanks again. Have a wonderful evening, and I'm glad Mercury retrograde is over for all of our sakes.
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Well, good night, everybody. Blessed, blessed be.
Blessed be.
Bye, everyone.